In 2008, a film came out that at the time seemed like a new, fun, exciting take on the superhero genre. Up to this point in the realm of superheroes in live action, we'd seen mild success. The early ventures into the superhero genre were quite successful in the 70s and 80s with the Christopher Reeves-led Superman films and the Tim Burton Batman movies, which carried over into the early 90s. But then, superhero movies got kinda bad. The Superman franchise had turned into a goofy parody of itself, and the latter Batman films helmed by Joel Schumacher went so against what Burton had done due to fan backlash over the much darker tone of Batman Returns that they also sort of turned into just a parody of the Caped Crusader. Then another renaissance was ushered in with the release of X-Men in 2000, directed by Bryan Singer, a much more serious and grounded take on the genre, and to complement it, the much cheesier but wildly more successful Sam Raimi-helmed Spider-Man movies. But yet again, we started seeing copycats and pale imitations that sort of sent the genre spiraling, films like Catwoman, Daredevil, or Fantastic Four. Thankfully, Christopher Nolan came in to save the day with his 2005 genre bender, Batman Begins. A darker, grittier, and much more self-serious adaptation of the Caped Crusader than we'd ever seen before. Much like the X-Men films that preceded it, Batman Begins felt like a comic book film that took place in the real world, and it wasn't concerned with feeling like a comic book. It was focused on just being a good movie. The superhero stuff kind of felt second to the characters and the story. Then we all know what happened in 2008. The Dark Knight was released and got the entire world to take superhero and comic book films seriously. But The Dark Knight isn't the 2008 film I was referencing at the beginning. No, in 2008, another superhero movie was released that would inevitably change the landscape of the genre forever. That film is, of course, Jon Favreau's Iron Man. But this essay isn't about Iron Man, but more so how it's time for another shift in the genre. I'm going to explain why the upcoming release of Matt Reeves' The Batman is the exact kind of superhero film that we need right now. Recently, on the popular streaming service Disney+, Marvel's Eternals was added for home viewing. I had skipped out on this film when it came out in theaters, which is the first time in memory that I can remember doing so since before the Avengers. I've been a pretty big fan of the MCU since renting Iron Man back in 2008 from the local video store 48 Hours Video, but between the underwhelming trailers for Eternals and the overwhelming amount of negative reviews for the film, I just wasn't excited, because as much as I love the MCU, I tried to accept them for what they are. Fun, easy-to-digest popcorn flicks with great casting and likable characters, and more often than not, pretty entertaining action. But some people really believe that these movies are phenomenal pieces of art, and who am I to tell them otherwise? But that being said, it doesn't change my opinion on them. They're fun, I like them, I look forward to some of them, but they're typically not bound to end up on my top 10 best movies of the year list. So when these movies I already feel are a bit overhyped, are getting negative reviews from the people who I believe to overrate them to begin with, that's not very appetizing. But I'm still a Marvel shill, so of course I watched it anyway, and no joke, I turned to my roommate 28 minutes into it and asked if we should bail. My issue isn't just that I didn't enjoy the movie and found it a slog to finish, it's that because of the way the MCU is crafted, I felt like I had to watch it. Despite no desire and no excitement, I still felt a need to watch it, not out of enjoyment, but obligation. This is a problem. Now I know it's easy to say, well, Mr. Former Film Student, you could just not watch it. And you're right, but now what happens when these characters or plot elements show up and are important in future crossover films? Imagine watching Avengers Infinity War without ever seeing Guardians of the Galaxy, or seeing Endgame without ever seeing Ant-Man. Do you see my point? For these movies to carry emotional weight, for these movies to get me to care about these large, massive crossover events, it requires me to watch all of these different films to be able to enjoy them to their fullest, which again, isn't always a problem. Marvel has been on a pretty good streak in recent memory. Seeing Endgame in theaters is an experience I'll never forget and hopefully one day tell my children about. But with the massive influx of superhero and comic book related films and shows now being released at a constant rate, it sometimes feels like I'm watching them out of obligation rather than a true desire. Now all of this sounds like needless complaining, and I haven't even talked about The Batman yet, but I swear I'm getting to the point. One of the biggest issues and well-documented criticisms of the MCU is the formulaic feel and lack of personality in the visuals. I know it's a problem myself and others have been openly critical about. Every Marvel movie kind of feels the same, and despite a few exceptions, a majority of them are indistinguishable in terms of presentation and style. A lot of their scenes look very flat in terms of color and contrast, and a lot of their cinematography boils down to 2 medium close-ups and a wide shot for coverage. Say what you will about the DCEU and all of its abundant flaws, but Man of Steel feels like a Zack Snyder film. Not that that's a great thing, but Aquaman feels like a James Wan film. You see what I'm getting at. Now tell me if Spider-Man Homecoming feels like a John Watts movie. However, despite my criticisms of the formulaic feel of the MCU, to an extent I understand it. The whole point of the MCU is to blend together, to seamlessly have characters enter and exit each other's films without it feeling jarring or out of place. Comic book Guardians of the Galaxy are nothing like their film counterparts. They've even heavily changed characters like Thor so that they blend with the rest of the MCU in a cohesive way. This works for the most part, but also I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bored of it. Everything feeling the same, the similar shots and story beats all being done time and time again. And while it's one of their biggest strengths, I won't even try to deny the interconnected aspect of all the MCU films and shows make the larger events like Civil War or an Avengers film feel way more epic, but it ultimately ends up being one of their biggest weaknesses. The individual films, the individual moments, and even at times the characters feel less important to the story because you're constantly wondering, what's next? Instead of focusing on what's unfolding in front of you, there's always a constant thought in the back of your head wondering what the next film will be, what's going to happen in the post-credit scene, when's the next big Avengers movie. When your sense of scale and scope gets too big, often the little things, the details, they fall by the wayside. Now back in high school when I had my first YouTube channel, inaccurately titled The Casual Movie Guy, I had an idea for a video, and in the video I was going to praise the MCU for its connective and long-form storytelling, but also discuss how it saddens me that we'll never again get something like Raimi's Spider-Man films or the Dark Knight trilogy. Due to the state of superhero films at the time and the constant need to build up and fill out a connected, shared universe of characters, I was really discouraged as a fan of superheroes and a young aspiring filmmaker with my own crazy dreams of one day making a Flash movie or Green Lantern film. That sadness grew over the years as I read more comics, watched more superhero movies, and my appreciation for comics and superheroes expanded greatly. However, the sadness, the discouragement, finally has been subsided with the upcoming release of Matt Reeves' The Batman, set to hit theaters this March and starring my boy Robert Pattinson as the Caped Crusader, the first in a planned trilogy of films all set to be directed by Matt Reeves, and the best part is that as of right now it has no connection to any of the other DCEU properties except for an upcoming HBO Max show about the Gotham City Police Department, and even that seems like a way to just flesh out characters like Jim Gordon more. No Superman, no Wonder Woman, no Flash, no Justice League or Suicide Squad, just a trilogy of films setting out to tell one cohesive Batman story. And to some, this may seem like a step back from where superhero movies are at and have been since the Avengers blew up theaters back in 2012, but this is the wrong way of thinking. The Batman is the exact type of film we need to keep superhero movies fresh and interesting. I'm heading into this movie expecting to see a movie, a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the first in a trilogy that will hopefully have a conclusive ending to it. I won't be sitting in theaters wondering if Superman is going to show up or if Batman is going to need the Flash's help. I will solely be concerned with the characters and story set within this film, and that is wonderful. I couldn't be more excited to finally once again look forward to a superhero film that isn't concerned with killing time and tiding fans over until the next big crossover. Finally, we're getting a superhero film that seems detached from the studio copy and paste format. Finally, a superhero film that looks, feels, and acts like a real movie from a director with a vision, a story that he wants to tell. Jesus Christ, just look at these shots from the trailer. When's the last time we saw a superhero film that was dripping with this much atmosphere and life, both in the presentation and style of the film? Shazam? Guardians of the Galaxy? The cinematography, the style, the personality. This looks like a film. The shots look interesting, the lighting looks atmospheric and moody, the lo-fi look of Robert Pattinson's suit and Batmobile. Look, I could sit here and gush all day about how excellent these trailers have been and why I think this movie is going to be fantastic, but the main point is that The Batman is exactly the movie that fans and moviegoers need, but don't know it yet. It looks raw, unhinged, grimy, and most importantly is a film that hopefully is able to stand on its own merits as a film without concerning itself with setting up some big, loud crossover. It's been done. We've seen it. Give us something new. Tell me a story with characters I invest in and care about, not because I've watched 23 goddamn movies and 4 shows about them, but because the writing is good and the characters feel like real people. Overall, it's evident I'm very excited for Matt Reeves' The Batman, partially because I'm a gigantic Robert Pattinson fan and am quite fond of movies like Cloverfield and both of Matt Reeves' directed Planet of the Apes films, but the potential of a film, nay, a trilogy of films about one of my favorite superheroes, disconnected from the clusterfuck that is the DC Extended Universe, focused on telling an engaging story with interesting themes and characters that looks and feels distinct and different from other films of its kind, that doesn't feel like an episode of a big budget long-running show but a real film. The Batman is the movie we need right now. Well, thanks for watching this video. Let me know in the comments if you're excited for the Batman. If you're not, let me know why. I'd love feedback on the video as well, and of course, if you enjoyed watching, like the video, subscribe, and click the little bell notification so you get notified when I post new videos. And as always, I will see you guys on the next video.